welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something pretty complex in Malaysian politics.
Yeah, what's that?
The relationship really between the ideals politicians talk about and, well, the money, the financial side of things.
Ah, okay, that constant tension.
Exactly. We're basing this on an academic paper that looks into political financing, how populist narratives get built, and, how voters get influenced.
Right. It's like trying to see behind the curtain, isn't it? How power, money, and these narratives all connect in what the paper calls the people game.
That's a good way to put it, because you hear so much about defending Bumi-Putra rights or promoting Islamic governance,
Mm-hmm.
these big ideals.
Mm-hmm. Very prominent themes.
But then you see the influence of big business, huge sums of money moving around, and you start thinking, how do these fit together?
How do they balance those, if they even do?
That's what we want to get into. What are the actual mechanisms?
And that brings up questions for you, the listener, like, how does a politician pitch nationalist ideas while also needing support from big industries?
Good question. And what about state-owned companies? What's their role in funding political stuff, maybe behind the scenes?
And the big one, how do you tell a genuine promise from just, populist talk designed to get a vote but maybe serving other interests entirely?
Right. So our mission here is clarity. To map this out without getting lost in, academic weeds.
Okay, so where do we start? The basics.
Yeah, let's look at the underlying mechanics. Money politics. The paper dives into patronage first. It's got deep roots in Malaysia.
The UMNO's long reign, particularly.
Definitely. They used state resources pretty effectively. Think about Felda
The Land Development Agency, yeah.
and Petronas, the oil giant. These were used to build and keep loyalty, basically channeling resources to supporters.
And it's worth understanding how that worked. Felda wasn't just land. It created whole communities reliant on the state. That reliance often translated into political support.
Makes sense.
And Petronas. Well, controlling that much national wealth gives you immense power. Power to reward friends, fund operations. It shaped politics for decades.
And this links to the government-linked companies, the
Wow.
GLICs that the paper mentioned.
Wait, the big ones.
We're talking major players like EPF, the retirement fund,
Which holds savings for millions.
Sana, the sovereign wealth fund, and PNB, another huge investment group. The paper says these weren't just neutral financial bodies.
No, historically they could be used, and perhaps still are to some extent, as tools. Tools to help keep the ruling party stable.
How does that work practically?
Well, think about it. These GLRCs own huge chunks of the economy, their investment choices, who they appoint to lead them. It all has weight.
So decisions could be influenced by political goals, not just pure economics.
That's the concern raised. Strategic investments, politically connected appointments. It blurs the lines and raises questions about independence, conflicts of interest, potentially.
And then, of course, there's the elephant in the room, 1MDB.
Had to come up eventually.
This paper flags it as a huge example, globally significant, really, showing that collusion between political power and business interests.
And the sheer scale of 1MDB, I mean, the international fallout, it just highlights the danger when those lines get too blurry.
Yeah, it wasn't just bad finance, was it? It showed fundamental problems in governance, oversight. Trust took a massive hit.
Absolutely.
Okay, shifting gears slightly towards elections. The paper talks about electoral clientelism.
More direct vote-winning tactics.
Exactly. Things like BR1M, the cash aid program.
Which became STR later.
Right, these direct cash handouts. They help people, sure, but they're also widely seen as a way to, well, buy votes.
Or at least strongly encourage them.
And it's not just cash. Big development projects, too. The paper mentions Forest City in Johor. Huge project.
Presented as economic development, jobs.
But also carrying a lot of weight electorally in that region.
That's the core of clientelism, isn't it? That direct exchange. Support us, get this benefit. Whether it's cash now or the promise of jobs later, it can be very effective.
Ethically dubious sometimes, maybe?
Well, that's often the debate around it.
The paper also points out something crucial, but maybe less obvious. Media access. The playing field isn't always level.
Not at all. Historically, state media like RTM, newspapers like UTs in Malaysia,
They were seen as very pro-government, pro-UMNO back in the day.
which makes it incredibly hard for opposition voices to get their message out widely.
If most people get their news from sources that favor one side.
It really skews the information landscape, makes it tough for voters to get a balanced picture, doesn't it? It's a real challenge for democracy.
Okay, so we've got these mechanisms: patronage, GLICs, clientelism, media control. Now, how does this financial reality mesh with the ideals?
Yeah, the clash, or maybe the coordination.
The paper explores how ethnic and religious narratives get used alongside very pro-business policies, like Ketuana Malayu, Malay dominance rhetoric.
A powerful mobilizing idea for
But
decades.
then you'd see someone like Najib pushing hard for foreign direct investment, FDI. Seems contradictory, right?
On the surface, maybe, but it's often a strategic balancing act. The Ketuan and Malay stuff shores up the base, the Malay majority, appeals to identity,
Oh, wait.
but FDI brings economic growth. And that growth can then be framed as benefiting everyone, including Malays, through jobs, opportunities.
So tailor the message.
Pretty much emphasize identity politics to one audience, economic benefits to another. It's skillful politics, in a way.
Hmm. And this gap between promises and reality,
Mm-hmm.
it keeps popping up. Mahathir's New Malaysia after GE14. So much hope for reform.
Huge expectations.
But then a backtracking on things like ICERD, the Anti-Discrimination Convention. That caused a lot of disappointment.
Well, the New Malaysia idea tapped into a real desire for change, for justice, but pulling back on ICERD showed just how hard real reform can be.
Entrenched interests, political pressure.
Exactly. It revealed that gap between election promises and the, let's say, messy compromises of actually governing.
And you see echoes of that elsewhere. Anwar Ibrahim's Reformasi movement. Decades promising change.
Right, a long struggle.
Then after GE15, he forms a government with UMNO. The very party Reformasi was often fighting against, citing corruption issues.
That kind of coalition building, it definitely raised eyebrows. It shows the real politic, you know. The practical needs of forming a stable government can force compromises.
Deviations from the original ideals.
Sometimes, yes.
Then
It makes you think about the trade-offs leaders feel they have to make to get and keep power.
there's PAS, the Islamic Party. Their platform is built around Islamic governance.
Consistently, yes.
But the paper contrasts that ideal with, say, the poverty rates in Kelantan, a state they've governed for a long time.
Yeah, it raises questions.
It makes you ask, has the focus on those religious ideals led to better economic outcomes for the people there?
And look, this isn't saying religious governance can't lead to development. Not at all.
No, of course not.
But it forces you, the observer, to look at actual results, the lived reality, not just the stated ideals. Are the promises actually tackling the real-world problems people face? That's the critical question.
So, given all this, the tangled web of money, ideals, politics, how can you, listening to this, navigate it? How do you avoid getting manipulated?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Well, the paper offers some pointers in a section called How Not to Lose. First step, follow the money.
Always good advice.
Try to scrutinize political donations, keep an eye on what GLICs are investing in, even acknowledging that transparency isn't perfect. Reforms at places like the MAC are, well, ongoing.
Right, it's not like all the information is easily available, but paying attention to what is visible, like maybe controversial EPF investments the paper mentions,
That can reveal underlying motives.
it can offer clues, yes, about who benefits, what interests might be driving policy. Even partial information helps build accountability.
Okay, second point. Recognize narrative tactics.
Be critical of the stories being told.
Yeah. Question things like ethnic fear-mongering. The paper uses the example of claims that DAP threatens Malay rights. Look for actual evidence.
Don't just accept emotionally charged claims.
And check development promises against reality. Are they feasible? The paper mentions Sarawak's score projects those huge energy corridor plans as something needing critical evaluation.
It really requires a healthy skepticism, asking, okay, who gains from me believing this? Or where are the hard facts behind this promise? That empowers you to judge better.
Makes sense. And finally, the paper stresses institutional reforms,
Strengthening the system itself.
like making the MACC stronger, actually getting a proper political financing act passed, like Transparency International pushes for, more transparency on party funding,
Crucial for long-term health.
and also supporting independent media. Outlets like Malaysia Kini, The Vibes, places that offer different perspectives, act as a check on power.
Absolutely vital. Strong, independent institutions, a free press. These are the pillars. They provide the checks and balances needed to counter potential manipulation or abuse.
So let's try and wrap this up. We've seen this core tension in Malaysian politics.
The high-minded ideals versus the grubby realities of money and elite interests.
Kind of, yeah. Appeals to ideals are common, but they often intersect with, and are sometimes maybe driven by, these financial concerns.
Which means, for you listening, being informed and critical is just essential. You can't take political talk at face value.
Question the motives, look for evidence.
Exactly. Form your own conclusions based on digging a bit deeper.
Okay, so here's a final thought to leave you with, something to chew on. Given how deep these patterns run this whole interplay of money and ideals, what does that mean for Malaysia's democracy long term?
Yeah. What are the consequences for the relationship between the state and its citizens going forward?
Something to reflect on. Thanks for diving deep with us today.